Okay, hello. Today I want to talk a little bit about what we call the New Orleans blues progression, which is a useful thing to know about if you're, first of all, obviously if you're interested in blues, but also because it crops up loads and loads in lots of other kind of US roots music, kind of Americana if you like. Last night I was at a brilliant gig over here in North Wales, near where I live. It was a Texan singer-songwriter called Carrie Rodriguez. You may have heard of her. Absolutely superb performer, brilliant singer, brilliant fiddle player. And I was listening to the stuff she was doing, which is kind of bluegrassy country, a little bit bluesy, and the New Orleans progression kept coming up, or at least hints of it, every now and then. You know, it's such an integral part of US popular music, if you like. So what I'm going to do today is kind of break it down and look at how it works and some of the techniques you can use to make it work on the piano and kind of create a cool sound with it. The way I'm going to do that is by filming myself playing a fairly gentle, straightforward New Orleans blues. In fact, I've already done it, so I know it's gentle and straightforward. And then talk through it in detail, okay, which is a format I sometimes use and people seem to like. Before I do that, I should say a couple of things. First of all, as usual, I'm going to assume a certain amount of knowledge on your part. So I'm going to talk about various chords and various techniques and so on and so forth. And I'm going to assume you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably need to look at some of my earlier videos, particularly my ones on really basic harmony and my basic blues piano course. And I have playlists for those, so I'll include playlists in the video. Secondly, it's probably a good idea if you actually know what a New Orleans blues sequence looks like. Okay, rather than play through it now, I'll just do a kind of a screenshot of it for you here. What I'm showing you here is a standard 12-bar blues sequence across the top in the key of C, and underneath, for comparison, is New Orleans blues. And as you can see, there is a more diverse selection of chords in the New Orleans blues. Okay, we'll talk about it in more detail in the sort of analysis section, but it's really interesting because it's a progression that uses what we call a circle of fifths. Okay, very, very important concept in music, but we'll deal with that shortly. For now, here is me playing, I think about 3 times through a New Orleans blues on the piano. When I've played it, or when you've watched me play it, we'll go through it in some detail and talk about what I was doing. Before we have a look at some of the things I was doing there, let's take a minute to think in just a bit more detail about the chord progression. Here's that chart I showed you earlier. we're comparing a typical standard 12 bar in C with a New Orleans 12 bar, also in C. Now, as you can see, they're pretty similar up to the end of bar 7. Okay, and at that point, the New Orleans progression makes this kind of dramatic leap from a C to an A7. It's a very distinctive sound. Okay, and from there, the progression follows what we call, or part of what we call, the circle of fifths to get back to C. Okay, which is the tonic chord. So, in other words, it exploits the tendency of dominant seventh chords to resolve onto chords that are a fifth below them. So, A7 resolves to D7, D7 resolves to G7, and G7 resolves to C. It's called the circle of fifths because if you kept following that, if you went C7 to F7, F7 to B flat 7 and so on and so forth, ultimately you would end up back on an A chord. Okay, it would come full circle. So that C to A7 in bars 7 and 8 sounds like a sort of big and strange harmonic leap, but the circle of fifths actually gets us back very quickly and neatly to the tonic chord of C in time for the turnaround here. Now, having said all that, you might be wondering why I've included a D minor 7 chord as an option in bar 9, because in fact that's what I was actually playing when I was improvising, a D minor 7 rather than a D7. Now, that D minor 7 doesn't resolve as strongly onto the G7 as a D7 chord would, but it's still logical, it still works, it's part of what we would call a 2-5-1 progression. Substituting that D minor 7 there gives the progression a slightly more contemporary sound, okay? A7, D minor 7, G7, C. Whereas very traditional old school New Orleans blues would always use the D7. A7, D7, G7, C. Okay, so here we are with that little performance up as a screencast. What I'm going to do is play through it and talk about some of the stuff that's going on. First thing to mention, you'll notice right at the start here, let me just play it. Look at that chord I'm starting off on in the left hand. Very simple and straightforward. It's just a C and a G. I'm leaving out the third deliberately. And that's because sometimes, although we talk about this blues being in C major or whatever for simplicity's sake, sometimes it's actually very difficult to define whether blues is major or minor. Okay, in some ways it makes sense to just think of it as blues rather than major or minor. So what I've avoided doing is playing the third there, because if I played the third, it would give the C chord either a major or minor identity. If I played E natural, immediately the listener would peg it as being major. If I played E flat, immediately the listener would peg it as being minor. So rather than pinning it down to major or minor at this stage, I just play the open chord. Okay, the root and the fifth, to keep it kind of ambiguous and kind of bluesy. Okay, so nice and simple in the left hand there to start with. Let's now look at some of the stuff I'm doing up here in the right. Okay, so quite simple movements going on there. It's all using the most basic blues scale. C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, B flat, B. No pentatonic notes in there so far. The kind of, what's the right way of saying this? The kind of expression, the kind of attack I'm using here isn't too smooth, but it isn't too detached. It's somewhere in between, okay? Again, quite kind of ambiguous. Let's just run that again and see how I'm doing that. So quite detached notes. But there, do you see what I did on the F? To get myself smoothly up to that top C, I used a finger switch. There it is, switching third to thumb on the F. So already in that little phrase, I've built up a little bit of contrast. We've got the detached notes to start with, and then a little bit of smoothness. Okay, important lesson there, improvisation, especially in blues, especially in jazz, in fact in any genre, you know, is about much more than the notes you play. It's about the the particular rhythm, the particular method, the particular approach you take. Okay, let's just wheel back a bit and listen to where that goes. Okay, lovely little technique to use. I did a little twiddle there, or to use its proper technical name, a trill, on the C and B flat. And again, that was about creating contrast. So we just had a moment of kind of peace and stillness as we'd hit that top C, and that kind of trill broke that a little bit and gave a contrast. Here it goes. There we go. Similar sort of effect there. Okay, notice the span of notes I'm using here. The highest note I've used so far is C, and I've gone all the way down to G here. So more than an octave, and again, it's about creating variety, about creating contrast. Look what I'm doing in the left, that F chord, again, very simple. I'm giving it much more richness than I'm giving the basic C, okay, but again, nothing more elaborate than that at this stage. Oh, there goes my phone. There we go. People often ask me whether, you know, when you're improvising, how conscious a process it is. And I've talked about this before. And the answer is it's kind of conscious and it's kind of not. So a lot of the movement you saw here was the result of some planning, but mostly it was my fingers doing the thinking, drawing on the sort of resources lodged, I suppose, deep in my subconscious brain somewhere. You know, the experiences of what I've played in the past and little things that I know work comfortably. So the way it kind of works, and maybe a good comparison, is to think that what my conscious brain is doing is kind of the strategic stuff, saying, okay, we're going to go up here a bit and go down here a bit, you know, we need a bit of sort of variety here and a bit of contrast here. But the actual movements and the actual notes being played, in a lot of cases, are actually coming out of the subconscious brain. So it's kind of the engine room, if you like, taking orders from the orders from the conscious brain and kind of digging out the tools and the particular notes that it needs to make that sort of strategy happen. That's a really laboured analogy, but it's a really difficult process to describe sometimes, you know, to describe what's going on in your own brain when you're improvising something. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, little crush notes there. I did another crush note earlier where I slid from the F sharp to the G. Here I was doing a different sort of crush where I was actually playing two notes very close together at the same time. Let's just look at that again. Again, it's a nice little technique. Here we go. Crush, crush, there we go. Right, and there is that change up to the A7 chord. Yeah, notice I'm spelling out the A7 in full there. Really, you can almost hear how the character of the piece changes at that point. Let's just listen to it again. From C to A7. Now to D minor 7. Okay. And you'll hear that I'm beginning to move away from just using the notes of the blues scale there. So particularly that C and that A, that was very characteristically pentatonic. You know, the A is part of a C major pentatonic sound, and that was a very kind of, as I say, characteristically pentatonic sound that was going on there. Let's just hear it again. Seventh, nice. There we go. Okay, and the little turnaround in the left, very typical New Orleans blues turnaround. I don't spell out the full chord, but if you did, it would be C, C7, F, F minor. In fact, I think I put it in the, yeah, there we go. I've put it as the bar 11 in the New Orleans sequence, which then goes to the main turnaround based on a G7 chord, or as I play it, just a single G note in the bass there in bar 12 to get ready, take us back to the start again. Okay, so that's one time through. Here we go again. Same approach in the left, very simple. Little bit of interest there. Lots of crush notes. A dog wandering into shot. Watch this. Okay, I broke a rule there and I hit a major seventh, which is supposed to be a great crime in the blues. Oh God, you know, avoid major sevenths. They don't sound bluesy at all. I just use it as a quick passing note there for a nice effect, because as it was going up the kind of bluesy scale, I think it adds a nice bit of contrast. Let's just hear it again. There. Didn't linger on it. There's the A7. Crush note. C7, F minor. Turn around. Okay, something to really notice here, and I've done it a couple of times in those first 2 times through, is that I'm not sticking rigidly to the beat. If you played that again and stood there or sat there clapping time, you would hear that often I was going away from that beat. Okay, that is deliberate, and it's a technique called rubato or tempo rubato, which just means rubato just means robbed or stolen. So tempo rubato is stolen time, and it means just being a bit free and easy with the beat, playing some bars shorter, some bars longer, you know, speeding up, slowing down a bit, purely for expressive effect. Now, when you're playing slow blues, and it's also really common in cocktail piano actually, when you're playing slow blues like this, you can afford to indulge in a bit of rubato and a bit of playing around with the beat, you know, to build and develop the expression. It's more difficult in a band, okay, because drummers and bass players especially really get a bit freaked out if you try and vary the tempo. But if you're playing solo, then using a bit of rubato in slow stuff like this can work really well. It's a really old technique if you listen, especially to a lot of kind of orchestral music from the 19th century. You know, if you listen to especially the later stuff, sort of Wagner and things like that, there's an awful lot of rubato goes on there, and it's a technique that has come into popular music, but especially in cocktail piano and slow blues and stuff like this. So you won't hear it so much now because I'm about to go into something that's more kind of rhythmic, as you will see. Here we go. Okay, tighter rhythm, and here I'm going into a walking bass in the left hand. That walking bass is just made up of bits of the chords and bits of blues scale. Okay, notice that I'm being quite careful how I finger it because I want it to be smooth, I want it to flow, but I don't want to be using too much pedal. If I use too much pedal against a walking bass, it'll just turn to mush. Okay, so I'm being quite careful how I organise my fingers there. Let's look again. In order not to have really big breaks. There we go. Fifth, see what I did there? Whoops. And down. Thumb under an awful lot. Here we go, thumb under. Okay, so there's a lot of fingers and thumbs going over there just to keep that stuck together. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's not super difficult. It's another of those situations where practicing your scales really helps. What's going on in the right hand here, I'm not super happy with, because I kind of, at this point my hand kind of gets locked in this little zone here and nothing very interesting happens for a while. Let me just play what I'm doing again. Here we go. This is one of my really bad habits as an improviser, is to play those little groups of 3, da 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 da, and it's really easy to get stuck in them. Here we go again. 3, I don't know. Okay, so that was kind of that section I'm a bit disappointed with because I found it a bit dull. I got a bit lost in the right hand, probably because I was concentrating a bit harder on what was going on in the left here. But things sharpen up from this point because here there's a bit that I'm really quite pleased with. Let me just, and it happens just after the change to the A. Now you'll notice that I don't play the A chord, I just go for the note there. Listeners by this time have got used to the fact there's a dramatic change there, so I don't have to play the full chord, I'm just going to play individual notes down an A scale. Listen to what's going on in the right. There, here. Okay, I'm really pleased with that, just that little movement. Got the piano here. Okay, that's really kind of idiomatically bluesy. So I've got the A chord going on. I'm playing that substitution in the right hand, which is kind of bluesier, and that nice rhythm, da 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 da, and then the contrast going up to the top C and down the blues scale. strikes me as something that works really quite well. Let's just have a listen to that again. So I'm quite proud of this, but here we go. Whoops, where are we? No, here we go. We want to be about there. There. Dun dun da da dun da 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 da, and contrast up to the C. Okay, so that worked really well. The reason that worked really well is because it was neat, it was logical, and it was elegant. Okay, all great musical improvisation, whether it's madly complicated or really simple and straightforward like this, tends to have those characteristics of logic and elegance, in that it makes complete sense where it is, and it's neat and it's rounded. Okay. Now, if you listen to a really great improviser, someone who's way better than me, you'll find that every phrase they play has that kind of logic and elegance. You know, if you listen to an Art Tatum or a Count Basie or you know, Oscar Peterson or whatever, everything is like that. Lesser mortals like me, you know, occasionally hit a really kind of happy or lucky phrase like that, and it sounds great. That's the kind of thing that we should be aiming for. Not many people can hit that kind of quality of phrasing all the time, but it's what, again, it's the kind of thing that, you know, really makes you feel good when you manage to hit it. So that's kind of, I feel like I saved a bit of pride playing that nice little section there after the fairly boring bit earlier. Okay, so I feel I've had a kind of massive, you know, brain download onto you there. Hopefully it wasn't too frantic. What I will do as normal is give you a bit of a plug for my book, How to Really Play the Piano. Because we're screencasting, I'll just show you the PDF here. Loads of stuff in here about blues and various other things. I think the New Orleans sequence is actually mentioned in there somewhere. £14.95, that's UK pounds for the print edition, and £9.95 for the digital download. I'll include a link as usual. I should also mention that these days I keep an index of my tutorials as a Google spreadsheet. It's a bit.ly link, and I'll embed it in the video so that you can see it. Any questions or comments or whatever, stick them in the comment thread. Sometimes I'm a bit slack about getting back to them, as I've made this pathetic excuse in the past, but things have been really busy with work at the moment, so I don't have quite as much time as I used to, but I do try to respond to comments as and when I can. So that's that. I'm hoping, I've got a few weeks free now, so I'm hoping to make some more videos over the next few weeks. Any requests or particular questions, ping them over, and you might find a tutorial getting made in response. Okay, so this has turned into a bit of an epic. I'm going to stop now, and I will hopefully see you again soon.